Okay, so we direct our attention to typical test question 8 and trying to apply the logic of inequality to this question. So the key point to start with is to notice that Iran has got only 3/4 the per capita GDP of South Africa, and you want to start by recognizing that, as written here, because they've got only 3/4 the per capita GDP of South Africa, if the distribution was the same, then we'd say, yeah, most people in South Africa got more goods, that the people in Iran only get 3/4 as much. But notice the data on the share of income to the top 1/5 of households. We'll call those the rich. Those rich get 45%, under half of the total GDP in Iran, and the rich of South Africa are getting 70%. Well, the key point is to think about what that implies for the non-rich. The non-rich 4/5 of households in Iran let's say it like this, got a much bigger share. Let's write it like that. Right? The non-rich in Iran got a much bigger share of the GDP than did the non-rich of South Africa. And here's the key point, star, star, star. Calculate the non-rich's share. The non-rich of Iran got 55% of GDP, and the non-rich of South Africa got only 30%. Let's write that down. Okay, there we go. Iran's non-rich got 55% of their GDP. South Africa's non-rich only got 30% of their GDP. So here's the thing we got to think about. We've got Iran has less goods per person, but most people got bigger shares. So that's the key point to be able to understand. We've got two different forces at work. Iran, less production per person, but Iran, bigger shares for most people. Well, as discussed and described in the notes, we can combine the comparisons of shares and the comparisons of per capita GDPs, and by multiplying those together, we'll get a comparison of the goods that the non-rich get in each economy. Let me write that down. So we've got here the comparison of shares that the non-rich get. 55% of GDP goes to the non-rich in Iran, and compared to only 35%. That's a factor that's going to tend to make the people of Iran better off. But they've only got $7,500 of per capita GDP compared to 10,000 in South Africa, and that's going to tend to make the South Africans be the people with more goods. So we've got to combine those two effects mathematically, and let's write down the values. All right, 55 over 35 is 1.57, so we'd say that the Iranian people's share of GDP is 1.57 times as big as the South African majority's share of their GDP. We're going to multiply that by 0.75, the 3/4. And those of you who are thinking this through will see right away, without doing the calculation, that 1.57, that's over 1.5. That's like greater than 3/2. 3/2 times 3/4. That's going to be bigger than 1, right? Yeah, let's do the arithmetic. And if I've done the calculation right, it's 1.178 blah, 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 or about 118%. And that is our punchline. the proposition that we have to explain, saying most people in South Africa got more goods than most people in Iran, is definitely false. We can say from our evidence that most people, the 80% non-rich of Iran, get about 18% more goods than the non-rich people of South Africa do. And some of you will be familiar with the point that South Africa is a bitterly unequal society. Hooray, apartheid was defeated, but oh my gosh, there's still an awful lot of work to do. You could also have come up to the same conclusion, the falseness, by comparing South Africa to Iran rather than Iran to South Africa. So you'd have 35 over 55 times 10,000 over 75, and we'd end up with the reciprocal of 1.18, which should be pretty simple to calculate if we have a calculator handy. And if you did the reverse comparison, you'd end up being able to say that most people in South Africa, the majority, 80% non-rich, the 4/5 of households who are non-rich, get only about 85% as much goods as the majority of the people in Iran do. All right, and that's typical test question 8. Again, don't panic about being able to follow the math exactly, because in this online environment, you just have to get the idea and be able to recognize it in a testing situation. That's it for now. Good health and goodbye.